Good morning. This is an audio check from the Press Theatre located in the basement of the Legislature of BC. Today's event is scheduled to begin at approximately 11:30. For anyone on the phone line, you may queue up to ask a question by pressing star 1. To withdraw your question, press star 2. Media will be limited to one question and one follow-up. Thank you.
Those Friday feels. Good afternoon, everyone, and actually I should say good morning, and welcome to today's operational information update on the flooding and landslide situation in BC. For today's briefing, we'll have updates from Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure, Rob Fleming, Minister of Agriculture, Food and Fisheries, Lana Popham, and Dave Campbell of the River Forecast Centre. A reminder to media on the line, please press star 1 to enter the queue. You will be limited to one question and one follow-up. With that, I'll turn it over to Minister Fleming.
Good morning. I'm grateful to join you from the territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. I want to start today's update with to begin with on ongoing weather events. The first of the forecasted rainstorms has now passed through, but as we all know, we're forecast to see more hit our province, with the strongest arriving next Tuesday and Wednesday. Environment Canada is warning of extreme rainfall that could worsen existing flooding or even create new flooding. There is an increased risk of landslides that accompanies this weather prediction, and power outages are possible from the winds that we are expecting as well. Environment Canada will continue to update the forecast, but for people in British Columbia, the time to prepare is now. If you don't need to travel, for example, during stormy weather, please plan to stay home. If you're required to drive, please make sure your vehicle has food, water, warm clothes, blankets, and other emergency supplies. With regard to the highway system, we will be ready. Crews and equipment are already on standby to respond if necessary. We'll be monitoring the roadways, particularly in the areas that were impacted by last week's storms. Safety is our top priority, and if required, we will preemptively close highways. If you need to be driving, I would urge everyone to consult Drive BC First for the very latest updates on road conditions throughout the province. I want to now move to a status update on some of the highways that were damaged 2 weeks ago in our province. Let's start with Highway 1 in the Fraser Valley. Yesterday we opened Highway 1 in the Sumas area. I'm pleased to report that traffic has been generally moving well through that corridor. This means that Vancouver all the way to Hope is now open on the number 1. This is providing another option for people who need to drive through that region, helping to smooth out the congestion that we'd witnessed earlier this week. East of Chilliwack in the Bridal Falls area, though, it continues to be open to single-lane travel at this time. Highway 7 continues to be under a travel order from Mission to Hope. This has been the primary corridor for commercial vehicles leaving Metro Vancouver. We've had a few minor accidents, but generally traffic is moving well along that corridor. Of course, Highways 7 and 1 converge at Hope, where drivers then take Highway 3 to access the interior. Highway 3 remains under a travel order, with the route designated for commercial trucks and anyone still returning to their primary residence in the interior. It has played a vital role in the movement of goods and getting our supply chain back up and running. About 4,000 commercial trucks now have traversed that corridor, moving the goods and supplies that we need in communities across our province. But unfortunately, this morning there was a serious accident on this route west of Princeton, and we've now had to temporarily close Highway 3. This is a reminder for all drivers to please slow down, to be attentive, to be patient. Crews are continuing to repair and upgrade corridors, and conditions are far from normal. Moving on to Highway 99, the last highway currently under travel order that we have is Highway 99, beginning this side of Lillooet. And again, aside from a couple of relatively minor incidents, it has performed well since it opened last Sunday. This route, again, is designated for regular passenger vehicles no larger than the size of a cube van. Highways 1, 5, and 8 are three highways that were heavily damaged and are in various states of repair. Yesterday, I updated the public on the Coquihalla and some of our plans to have temporary access and repairs completed and open to commercial traffic potentially by late January. The other highways I want to touch upon today are Highway 1 through the Fraser Canyon and Highway 8 connecting Merritt with Spence's Bridge. With regards to Highway 1 and the Fraser Canyon, there are 7 different sites along Highway 1 that were impacted, 4 of them suffering major damage, including damage to one bridge. Temporary repairs are underway. At Jackass Mountain, work is underway where a large section of 2-lane road was completely wiped out from a landslide. At Tank Hill, we're working collaboratively with CP Rail to build a temporary detour where a landslide sheared off about 70 meters of a 2-lane road and damaged the railway above it. The Nickaman Bridge was also damaged with a pier left hanging in the air. A temporary structure is going in there while we repair the existing structure. We have crews with over 50 pieces of heavy equipment working non-stop here, as they have been working at 200 other sites in the interior and south coast, and we believe we can have temporary repairs in place to allow traffic to be moving through this area by mid-January. It will be very restricted traffic flow with some single-lane sections and an at-grade rail crossing that will be temporary but will allow for the safe passage of vehicles. So that's the plan going forward on repairing and restoring that section of highway. Highway 8, as I commented on Tuesday, was largely destroyed. Significant damage occurred at 20 different locations, including 4 bridges, some of which were completely washed away. The Nicola River has literally carved a new path, washing away large sections of the highway in the process. About 5 or 6 kilometers of roadway is completely gone. Another 20 kilometers has been significantly damaged. We've been working with local and Indigenous leaders to restore as much temporary access as we can. That engagement will continue as we turn our minds to the long-term rebuild of Highway 8. Permanent rebuilds of Highways 1 and 8 and the Coquihalla will take a long time, there's no question about it, but the planning has already started. We have also gone out to the market and construction firms with requests for qualifications. So those have been sent out to construction companies, to engineering and design firms. We're seeking their innovation and expertise to see what they can bring to the table, working with our engineers. When we rebuild, we will rebuild better than it was. There's no question about that, and we're pleased again to see the federal government's throne speech as Parliament reconvened this week, talking about climate adaptation and building back better. Our infrastructure will be rebuilt to withstand the new climate realities that we find ourselves in. Let me move to supply chains. The highway networks being reopened has been incredibly important. As I mentioned, we're seeing broader supply chains come back to life as well. CP has been running its trains since Tuesday. CN is hoping to get restarted shortly. Airlines have increased their cargo capacity, so we're seeing flights delivering supplies to communities around BC. Truckers can now more easily navigate through Washington State and re-enter Canada beyond the impact area of the floods. Fuel is being imported, and we're confident that supplies will be maintained. Also, the federal government is helping to clear the backlog at the Port of Vancouver by adding container storage capacity on industrial land in Richmond. Products are moving, and our grocery store shelves and gas stations are being replenished. And these measures wouldn't be happening so quickly without exceptional coordination and cooperation between all levels of government, port authorities, the trucking association and the private sector that moves goods. The federal government has been incredibly supportive, and again, I want to thank my federal counterpart, Minister Omar Al-Gabra, for his alertness and attention to the situation in British Columbia and for his continued support for our province. And in closing, I just want to thank all of those who've gotten us to where we are today, this Friday morning. British Columbians continue to show their resiliency and their generosity to one another. We will get through this together. And I'd like to now invite Minister Popham to the podium.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Through our ministry, we have made approximately 1,400 direct connections with our agriculture sector over the last week, and that continued into last night. We met with the food and beverage sector, seeing some challenges around sourcing ingredients right now. We're identifying those challenges, and we've already seen some resolution there. So an example of that is being able to access red wheat for some of our flour mills, and so we're working hard to identify and resolve in those cases. Last night, we had a roundtable with the BC Cattlemen's Association. This is representatives from the ranching community from right across British Columbia. We've been working with these associations really and using them as problem-solving tables, and so putting it out there, some of the issues around feed challenges outside of the Fraser Valley. We do know that many of the ranchers understand the plight right now and have expressed that no matter they are not being impacted themselves, but they're right there with their fellow ranchers who are seeing these problems, and they're going to be doing everything they can to make sure that they're getting feed to areas, taking in some of the livestock. So it's really great to see the incredible generosity. There's a lot of farmers who've lost so much, but there also is a lot of hope out there, which speaks to the resilience. Highway 1 opened yesterday, and we're beginning to see more movement on the food supply. The access to BC milk supply is increasing, and we're now back up to about 90% of our usual milk supply. Yesterday, more than 1.5 million litres were picked up in the Lower Mainland. And this increase, it was driven by better access into the Sumas Prairie. Multiple farms were being inspected and cleared for production, so that's great news. These volumes include the Okanagan and Kootenay farms. That milk is being delivered to Alberta, and there is sufficient supply for all. Grain supply is starting to flow as CN and CP are in the process of getting back to full service, and also our federal meat establishments are all operating in British Columbia. With Highway 1 reopening, it also brings a lot more people through the impacted area. So I want to reiterate my message from yesterday that we just need to allow our livestock producers some room to breathe. The pictures that we're seeing, these are our neighbors, they're our communities, and it's unsettling. And we just need to be respectful of the hurt and the pain that's in those hearts of our farmers right now. Good news on the poultry front. Last night, I was in contact with the Spitters family. They have large chicken barns right in the flooded area, and the floods compromised their barns severely, and they did lose flocks. But yesterday they started to work on clearing those barns. The water has receded enough for workers to get in, equipment to get in. That includes workers from the Philippines that have worked with them for years. And so they worked right into the night, cleared those barns, and today they're disinfecting them. So that's really incredible news. I just really want to say a huge thanks to Corey and his sons, as well as those incredible workers from the Philippines, Joel, Charlie, Ronaldo, Melchor, and Franklin, for your dedication over the last 24 hours, especially to get your barns hopefully up and running. Special thanks also to Corey's wife, Svetlana, for making huge pots of soup to keep these workers fed and keep them warm and to give them a moment of rest during the day. Our government and our federal government are making good progress on their agri-recovery packages to assist livestock and crop producers. This is looking at recovery costs which are beyond the supports that are provided by the existing disaster relief fund. beyond the supports that are within my ministry, which are called business risk management programs, and beyond the private insurance that they have. This is going to be really important because as we look to see how much it's going to cost for farmers to get back into production, we need to make sure we're taking into account all those expenses. And when we put forward what we need to the federal government, we don't want to miss anybody. So these roundtables and constant conversations that we're having with farmers allows us to have a very good idea of what they need. I'm in constant contact with Minister Bibeau, and I anticipate in having a program developed in the coming weeks. Environment Canada is calling for more storms heading our way, and this is going to further test the resilience of our farmers. We're asking them to take all necessary precautions. I'm going to be checking in with them over the weekend and into next week. They have contacts with my ministry staff. And then for anybody who isn't part of an association or who hasn't made contact with us yet, I offer my social media as a direct way of getting a hold of us. We do have my staff monitoring that constantly. And I'll also ask you to call 1-888-221-7141, which is our Agri-Service BC. There's people there on the other end of those lines willing to help you immediately. So thank you to everyone again for their incredible patience. Please check the province's flood response page for the latest information. And now I'm going to turn it over to David Campbell with the River Forecast Centre for a further update.
Thank you, Minister. Dave, please go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to provide an update from the River Forecast Centre on current conditions and expectations as we come through these next storm events. We've seen the first of these storms and atmospheric rivers come through over the last day and a half with heavy rainfall through the south coast, lower mainland, observing rainfall amounts in the 50 to 90 millimeter range through many parts of the area. Temperatures were fairly cool, and so we did see additional snow accumulation, particularly at mid-elevations, and that's actually of additional concern as we come into the next events, having snow that we can see melt during the next series of storms. So at the moment, we're tracking an additional 2 atmospheric river events that are expected to reach the coast of BC over the coming days. The first of these is on the Saturday into Sunday period, followed by an additional one that is anticipated early next week on Tuesday. So we do have a short period of recovery in the rivers over the next 24 hours or so. And we're seeing the rivers have peaked from last night and are dropping. And really we're moving now into these next series of storms. At the moment, we remain in a flood warning state along the Sumas Prairie region. We have a flood watch out for the Sunshine Coast, Howe Sound, Sea to Sky, North Shore, and Lower Mainland areas in relation to conditions anticipated over the weekend. We're actively monitoring conditions on the Nooksack River. We saw again in the flows last night to be lower than were being forecast earlier from the Northwest River Forecast Center. But the risk of overbank flooding along the Nooksack River is a potential as we go into this weekend, particularly the storm on Sunday. Flood watch has been issued by the U.S. National Weather Service for Whatcom County, including the Nooksack River. And information that we've received from Whatcom County has indicated that the diking system along the Nooksack does have damage from the flooding last week. They're actively working on repairs to that. We're obviously watching that very closely. But in general, we are seeing that information coming out from the U.S. is that there is that increased risk of getting the Nooksack back up to bank full or overbank level. So there is risks as we go through this weekend to see additional floodwaters coming from the Nooksack into the Sumas River drainage. And that will really be a risk through Sunday. We're going to actively monitoring that situation, and as we get into the weekend, continuing to update information from that. The third system, or the system looking at Tuesday, is starting to get picked up on long-range forecasts and is in training a lot of kind of heat and moisture from the far side of the Pacific Ocean around the Philippines, and is looking to have a fair bit of potential in terms of severity of rainfall amounts. At this point, there's still a fair bit of uncertainty of where that system is going to make landfall in the Tuesday period, but it's certainly looking that there's a potential for a fairly decent storm cycle. Warm temperatures, again, seeing that potential for snowmelt as well as heavy rainfall. So that's over the Tuesday, Wednesday period. Obviously, we're going to go closer through the weekend. We'll have much more kind of certainty around where the trajectory of that storm is. So at the moment, it's focused in terms of areas on the coastal areas, but we have seen it kind of model run to model run, as well as different model runs coming out of weather forecasting from the US to have different resolutions on that, where that's going to make landfall. So we could see additional risks next week associated with the third storm, both in and around the coastal areas of BC, but also potentially back into the Nooksack River. Environment and Climate Change Canada is providing a media briefing today, 12:30, and they will have detailed information in terms of their perspective on the weather forecast related to these upcoming atmospheric river events. Thank you. That's for me.
Thank you very much. We will now take questions from the media. A reminder, please press *1 to enter the queue. You will be limited to one question and one follow-up. Our first question today comes from Shannon Patterson, CTV.
Oh, hi. Question for Minister Fleming and perhaps the Agriculture Minister as well. Prime Minister Trudeau is going to be touring flood-ravaged Abbotsford today with some of your colleagues and some First Nations chiefs from the area. Can you tell me what you're hoping for from the federal government from this visit? Obviously, you'd like to see a commitment of cash, a commitment to help rebuild. Specifically, is there a dollar amount you may be asking for? Can you even hazard a guess? And what are you hoping comes out of this visit?
Well, I think the Prime Minister being here is very important to meet with our provincial cabinet and tour the damage, because seeing is believing, and certainly the support we've had from the federal government has been exemplary. The reports I've updated people on in terms of the supply chain reactivation, federal provincial cooperation was essential for that. The military rebuilding breached diking systems in Abbotsford, getting prepared for the next round of potential storms, helping out in Merritt and Princeton with cleanups. The assistance pledged so far we've been really happy with. I hope there is more detailed conversations about that. The monetary dollar amount right now I think would be a precise figure of a lot. But we have, I think, heard the support that we have wanted to hear from the federal government, and we'll share our plans for rebuilding. We want to accelerate things, work efficiently and fast, and we want to have the federal government right there alongside us to do that.
Thanks for that question. So I'm really pleased to know that the Prime Minister will be out touring in Abbotsford today. I don't think you can understand the difficulties that these farmers are facing without really speaking to them. And so he will get a very good idea of the problems. He's also going to see the face of resilient people. And so I think that his visit will give farmers confidence that the federal government understands the needs that we'll have. And the ask that we'll be putting forward.
Shannon, do you have a follow-up?
Hearing those forecasts from the River Forecast Centre and the possibility of quite a lot of rain in next Tuesday's event, Minister Fleming, is it possible you would preemptively close some of these roads that have been reopened, Highway 1 or maybe Highway 3, Highway 7, just in case there may be more slides, something more preemptive rather than reactive this time if it looks like there's going to be a lot of water?
Yes, the answer is yes. We preemptively closed Highway 3 because visual inspection of an area that had previously been 4 lanes that was reduced to 3 showed signs of further stress and strain and tension cracks. If there are weather events that are at risk of producing slide activity, for example, or roads that could be at risk of washouts and stranding motorists, we'll preemptively close highways. But that determination will be made by crews that are on the ground, and as I said, we have heavy equipment already mobilized for the next 2 storms that are projected.
For the next question, we go to Lisa Eustace, City News.
I'm wondering if, and I don't know which minister this is who can talk to this, but some of the concerns for during the cleanup, I saw Public Health put out a thing today speaking about asbestos, that, the flood damaged areas that may be, within people's homes or even, lingering in the air. So I wonder if you can just talk about some of the risks people are facing as they're doing this monstrous cleanup.
So the cleanups are coordinated between a whole bunch of different agencies that are doing the work. That would include people from municipal public works and municipal fire departments who are very well trained on asbestos safety and other forms of safety. We would have construction companies that are doing debris flow clearance that have expertise in those situations like this. So I feel like we have an incredibly large pool of very experienced people that are working quickly and working safely. For example, we've wanted to get into some areas to do work on our roadway system and have not done so because it was deemed unsafe, and so we've had to wait in a couple of those 200 locations to get in. We had to figure out a way, for example, to fill in some of the sinkholes and test whether those would be safe to put vehicle weights back on it. These are being determined by experts on the ground with experience in making those kinds of determinations, and I think it's the same for areas where you've got damaged households and you've got potentially hazardous material on the ground. They're working with those who are involved in disposing and storing that kind of waste and to do it safely.
Lisa, do you have a follow-up?
I'm wondering if Minister Popham can talk a bit more. I was really caught aback yesterday when you were talking about the emotional distress, not even be able to give estimates of the losses that animal farmers have suffered, animal producers have suffered. And I wonder if you can talk a bit more about that. There have been disasters before, not on this level, but just what these farmers are experiencing and what is so different this time.
Thank you for the question. So the devastation is serious, and when it comes to folks who farm livestock, there's a relationship that they have with those animals, and in many cases there's been a very bad ending. The farmers are doing their best to focus on the positive parts of British Columbians reaching out, but they're also suffering. They know the losses they've had. They want to be able to keep moving forward. There'll be a moment in time when they're going to reflect on what's happened. But I think one farmer told me if they start doing that now, they're going to lose momentum. So they want to keep that momentum going. And we're not going to stay away from those numbers forever. We're just trying to allow some room for those farmers to breathe right now and to deal with the task at hand.
Next we come to the room. We'll go to Richard Zussman, Global News.
For Minister Fleming, Trans Mountain sent out an advisory yesterday. They've removed the line that they are hoping to have their line reopen by that around December 1st timeline. So does this mean we will have to continue rationing in British Columbia beyond that point because of concerns that pipeline won't be reopened in time?
We'll have a full update, I believe, on Monday from Minister Ralston and Minister Farnworth. The reality is that supply is coming in significant quantities right now by barge and, of course, by rail. Yesterday we had 12 westbound and 12 eastbound trains on CP alone. CN's capacity will add to additional shipping capacity, and we have highways reopened, including a relaxed border restriction for British Columbia truckers to get in and out of the U.S. So there's a lot of supply chains that are open, and there's fuel that's arrived already via barge from western states, and so I think an accounting of what is arriving and the Kinder Morgan situation will be provided in a fulsome update on Monday.
Richard, do you have follow-up?
I do. likely over the weekend will be some travel. We've heard of stories of hockey teams that are traveling for games or other people who are traveling. What is the advice to people in British Columbia this weekend around their travel? Like, should people not travel due to the gas restrictions, due to the upcoming weather? Like, what should people be deciding to do with all these pressures that continue to exist?
Well, people should continue to conserve fuel because it's working. We're all doing our part. People are restricting to 30 liters per filling, and that has helped alleviate a situation where we had long lineups at gas stations and gas stations closing for lack of fuel. It's now a lot more normal according to the Canadian Fuel Association. So people should continue to do that, practice that in their activities. What they use their fuel on and conserve it for is up to those individuals. What I would say, though, is coming out of this briefing and what we've heard from the River Forecast Centre is absolutely consider restricting your travel because we've got significant weather events on the way. We don't know how hard they're going to hit, but people need to pay attention to Drive BC. It may be the right time to reconsider some travel that is not necessary. I would urge people to do that, in fact. Because we do need to have our highways functioning for the movement of goods, and we need to all pay attention to being safe with a storm front headed our way that could be significant.
Staying in the room, we'll next go to Mira Bain, CBC.
Minister Fleming, how confident are you that all remediation work done in flood-affected areas, especially for the dikes over the past 2 weeks, are going to hold up against the storm that's coming over the weekend?
Well, I'm advised of significant work that has been undertaken. The all-hands-on-deck approach in the Fraser Valley has utilized a lot of workers and equipment to be able to repair breaches and strengthen the diking system there. It might be an opportunity for me to bring in the Executive Director of Emergency Management BC to make additional comments, Pater Brack.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Peter Brock, EMBC. We'll go to Zoom.
Yeah, thank you. Peter Brock, Emergency Management BC Executive Director. I'd say with the incoming forecasted rain, what we do know is working with our partners, particularly in Abbotsford, that full priority is on monitoring the current status. They put a lot of resources in to address current works, and I think with the incoming weather, the real focus point moving forward is just continuing to monitor and make sure that the province is providing everything that Abbotsford needs to get the job done. So I think overall we're going to be looking at the weather coming in and really providing anything that local communities require in response to that weather when it becomes more certain. Thank you.
Mira, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I do. I'm wondering, how are the people living in those areas going to be warned, if there is a major event and if the dikes are failing, what's going to happen?
I think it will, again, be based on coordination between EMBC and local government. So we were collaborating on Tuesday when the Barrowtown pump station was under threat, and the decision was made not to use the message that the province had developed because it would have caused panic and been counterproductive to the efforts to save that infrastructure, which, of course, that evening successfully did. So I think it will operate exactly the same way. It'll be based on decisions made on the ground in real time. Preparations will be made to have all those things available as contingencies and used if they're helpful. And but the decision will respect from those monitoring the situation most closely on the ground as to whether that should be activated or not.
For the next question, we go back to the phone lines. Derek Penner, Vancouver Sun.
I appreciate you've already addressed this question somewhat, but it's another question about the fuel situation. You mentioned there will be a more full briefing on Monday, but at this point, is there any way you can quantify how much of the gap being left by Trans Mountain's continued operation is being filled by those alternative deliveries?
Well, Monday will give you an idea of how much crude was in the pipe that continued to be in the refinery cycle at Parkland. It will give you an idea about how much gasoline and diesel have been received by the province, I believe. And also, you know, what is being barged, what supply chains have been activated. In terms of gasoline that has arrived and then been distributed here on the south coast, short supply chains have been reactivated. So the Sunshine Coast has taken receipt of gasoline. The Nanaimo has continued to receive barges of gasoline that's then distributed across Vancouver Island and the Gulf Islands. So it's working quite well, but it's working well because British Columbians are doing the right thing, which is saying, you know, look, gas is in short supply, you know, conserve where you can and adhere to the restrictions that are in place. And it's having a good effect in the province of BC. We haven't had any areas that have absolutely run out of gasoline, and we've been able to replenish supplies that have run low.
Derek, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, some of the images that Trans Mountain has made available, aerial images of exposed pipeline in areas where there has been, you know, land washed away from the pipeline, appear pretty dramatic. Has all that raised concerns with the province about the continued safe operation of the existing facility, let alone the expansion?
Well, I think that both public and private infrastructure, and in this case, pipeline infrastructure, after extreme weather events, they always and should take precautions. Inspecting damage is obviously very important. And where there's exposed pipeline now, where material was washed away, just like occurred on our highway system, they're making the kinds of repairs that we are to our infrastructure. So I think what I would say, though, is that the federal government and all sources of fuel and the provincial government have coordinated on how to make sure that in the case of a reduced supply, we've been able to maintain supply. So we'll continue to work with all our partners to make sure that things are operated safely, that we can work together, where sometimes getting into repair areas, we work together because we're both seeking the same access to the same area, and we'll continue to do that.
Next question, Mike Hager, Globe and Mail.
Hi there. Maybe Minister Fleming and Mr. Brock can answer this. We've talked to a number of First Nations up Fraser Canyon and then along Highway 8 who are totally stranded still and getting airdrops of supplies. Can you outline how many communities are kind of cut off now from any sort of road access and what is being done to help them?
Yeah, thank you. So you're correct. There has been a lot of supplies delivered by air, including by the Canadian military, food, water, essential supplies. For those who are cut off right now, we've been working with the Ministry of Forests on punching through roads where we can, where the existing highway system is no longer available. So some communities have been reconnected to usable parts of the highway system. And we have communicated regularly with Indigenous leaders, and you've got some unincorporated areas and local governments there that also we've been working closely with on planning repair work, getting in and doing repair work, but also making sure that they're not running out of the kinds of goods that they need. I'll ask maybe Mr. Brock again to update any further on some of the initiatives EMBC has taken.
Okay, we'll go to Emergency Management BC's Peter Brock next.
Yeah, thanks. I don't have the actual numbers, but can certainly circle back with numbers impacted. But to reiterate, yeah, lots going on in regards to resources being flown into communities that need it. Emergency Management BC has had requests for water, for example, for food. Those things have been flown in with the support of ministries that support aviation and also Canadian Armed Forces assisting with that. So just the real message I want to convey is that as communities have needs, and those needs will change day to day and sometimes minute by minute, based on their impacts, we're certainly standing by and ready to support as needed and continue to do so. Thanks.
Mike, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I've asked before, but I'm just hoping either your staff could follow up, Mr. Brock, or you can answer right now. how many communities are the new Indigenous response teams that Minister Rankin announced earlier in the week? How many are they actually helping right now, or what's their timetable for starting to deliver this help?
So I think what you heard is that there are many. We can get you some numbers through Minister Rankin's ministry, perhaps, but we've got communities that weren't impacted by the floods directly helping other communities that were. We've got local crews, we've got band councils using equipment alongside of municipal governments, alongside the Ministry of Forests and Natural Resources, our ministry, and I'll try and get you an idea of how many communities have been impacted and that we're doing work on.
For the next question, we go to Cindy Harnett, Times Colonist.
Oh, thank you so much. Further to Richard's question, I hear that there will be an update on Monday, but in the event of more road closures or damage, do you anticipate the extension of the December 1 deadline, either by way of gas or travel restrictions?
So that's why we're going to update the situation on the 29th. We're monitoring how much fuel we have in reserve in terms of new supply that's coming in. So quantity determines what restrictions may continue to apply or can be lifted, and that's why we'll do an update with Minister Ralston as well on Monday.
Cindy, do you have a follow-up?
I do. Is there anything more specifically you can say about Vancouver Island in terms of an update, or anything about Highway 1 or 19, or?
Under the circumstances, the Malahat number 1 is functioning quite well in both directions, 24/7. So the work that was done in the first week was critical to getting that reopened much more quickly than we had originally anticipated. Highway 19 repair work has gone well. It continues to function, and it is slower moving on the Malahat. There's no question about it, and it should be. People need to drive to conditions, and in terms of having maintenance crews out and the ministry providing inspections through the weather events that we're anticipating, Highway 1 and the Malahat system will be part of that.
We have time for one more question. We go to Mary Brooke, Island Social Trends.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. I missed the first 3 minutes, so I'm sorry, Minister Popham, if you already answered this, but I'm just looking at the availability of produce to BC. You mentioned blueberries, raspberries, cabbage, and so on yesterday, whether that will impact retail supply to the consumer in the store, and how that will impact restaurants.
Thanks for the question. So we think our supply chain is in good shape. There's definitely different routes that it's arriving, and we're having it sent in from different areas. But the Fraser Valley is one area of British Columbia that produces. We do have, so I can speak to the South Island, we do have farms on Vancouver Island that have direct relationships with restaurants, and I hear that that is still continuing. And so we may see some of that, but we're depending on people to alert us when that's happening, and so we can try and address it. But we feel that our supply chain is in good shape.
Mary, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, thanks. And there is sort of a movement afoot for years now, especially on Vancouver Island, for people to grow their own food in their own backyards. It's never a lot, but can you make a comment about food security and how at times when grocery chains might be interrupted for a few days or whatever, people have had their summer supply already in their freezers, and just sort of that whole thing about self-sustainability?
Sure, and that's a great question, and I think we've been through this. We've had a practice with the pandemic. The summer after the pandemic began, we saw people couldn't even buy seeds to plant their own back gardens, and so we've taken cues from that over the last couple of years. Our ministry has been supporting seed production in British Columbia and really addressing what resiliency means. And so the more we can see regionalized food systems, including Vancouver Island, the more resilient we'll be in the future. And so that's definitely been on my agenda since 2017, and we see more movement that way. But we will definitely continue to focus on that.
Thank you. A reminder to everyone on the line that our next scheduled update is set for Sunday morning at 11:30 a.m. That concludes today's event.